Welcome back to day 4 of the Circular Chess Championship Open Qualifiers. This is the final day, which means that the top 8 will be decided. Here are the standings after day 3. As a reminder, the winner of today's qualifier will claim the last automatic qualification spot, earning themselves the 4th seed. Then, the top 4 point earners will be invited as the 5th through 8th seeds. I haven't seen these games yet, but from what I've heard, this will be the most exciting finals match so far. Our finalists are 4th seed and 2-time finalist TekVnv, and 6th seed YuzuKi, who is making their first finals appearance after making the semifinals in 3 out of 4 qualifiers. This is shaping up to be an exciting end to the Open Qualifiers, and I don't want to delay any further, so let's get right into the match. So YuzuKi gets the white pieces for game 1, and he goes with the normal king's pawn opening. TekVnv responds the same way. YuzuKi pushes his queen's pawn, and Tek continues to push his king's pawn. Now YuzuKi pushes his queen's pawn again, and this is definitely one of the most common openings, to first get your king's pawn out, giving you options with your queen and your bishop, and then going ahead afterwards and pushing the queen's pawn because it's defended the entire way through, and it also opens up your dark square bishop. And now Tek starts pushing his queen's pawn. YuzuKi keeps pushing. Tek now pushes his king's pawn, and after another pawn move, Tek goes for this knight move, which is something we've seen before, just going for the knight for pawn sacrifice, and that's what happens. And now Black's knight is under attack, but of course this bishop is defending it. Tek keeps pushing his queen's pawn, and now YuzuKi gets his knight in early. He has a big advantage since he has his queen already on the central ring, and he can also block this pawn if it doesn't move right away. It does move, and instead of waiting any longer, YuzuKi just goes for the sacrifice. So now both queens are in the game, but YuzuKi has the advantage of having his on the center. And now White brings their bishop into the game, and Black attacks White's bishop and knight. The bishop's defended, and so is the knight, so this is just a little bit of extra pressure, perhaps. White moves his knight out of the way, this attacks the pawn, so Tek keeps pushing to move it out of the way, and White now brings his bishop into the game. This does defend the queen, but I'm not sure what else it does. It would allow White to get to this square, being defended by the knight, but I'm not sure what all that accomplishes. He could maybe go for this undefended pawn, but I'm not sure. Let's see what happens. Black promotes, and White takes with the knight. So now both queens are on the central ring, with a minor piece blocking them, so there's definitely a lot of tension here. And here White finds an incredible move, finding check on the king, opening up the attack on the queen. There's nothing Black can do against this. There's no way to block the check, as it's 1 square away. So Black takes the bishop, and YuzuKi wins the queen. This puts YuzuKi in a really good position, having the queen in the central ring, and the king so out in the open. So Tek definitely has to get his other pieces in the game if he wants any chance at coming back. He moves his knight, likely to get his king to safety. YuzuKi moves his knight, likely going for a castle. Black moves his other knight, and YuzuKi castles. This also gets his rook into the game, as there's an open file. And now Tek brings his bishop out. This is a pretty strong move, as it's defended by the knight, attacks the queen, and also allows his rook to get into the game. White simply slides over, and now Tek finds an attack on the queen. Again, this rook is also defended by the knight, and YuzuKi slides over once more, now putting pressure on this pawn if this knight ever moves. Black starts pushing his rook's pawn, and now YuzuKi takes advantage of this strong rook, bringing it to the center. Black brings his knight off the central ring, although it was defended, so White would have had to sacrifice the exchange, and now White attacks it. Black defends, and now White starts pushing. Black does the same, and after White pushes again, Black moves his knight, now attacking the bishop in 2 different ways. White responds by simply taking the bishop, and Tek takes back with his rook. White keeps pushing, and now Tek moves his knight again. This is looking to be another pawn for knight sacrifice. That's what happens. So real quick, looking at material, YuzuKi has 2 rooks, and so does Tek. YuzuKi has 2 minor pieces to Tek's 3, of course, because of the bishop for queen trade, which leaves YuzuKi up a queen, and YuzuKi has 6 pawns to Tek's 5, which means White is up a queen and a pawn for a bishop. Let's continue the game. Black keeps trying to push his pawn, and now YuzuKi moves his knight out of the way, allowing his other rook to get into the game. Tek pushes again, which will now force the queen to move. That's what happens. YuzuKi blocks, and now Tek prepares to attack the queen with his knight, and now YuzuKi brings his queen off the central ring, which could prove to be an issue in the future. Tek attacks the queen, YuzuKi moves out of the way, and now Tek promotes. This is defended twice and only attacked once, so even though this knight will fall, the rook will likely fall right after. And of course, these players proving me to be worse than them once again. YuzuKi takes the rook first, so instead of being a knight for rook trade, it will simply be a rook trade, since after Black's knight captures, both players just simply lost a rook, which means at the end of the day, it was just a rook for pawn trade because the pawn promoted. Now YuzuKi finds a free pawn. This also attacks her rook, as well as putting Black in check. So the only response that doesn't lose right away is to block with the rook, and YuzuKi moves his queen back to the center. And now Tek pushes one of his 3 remaining pawns. YuzuKi does the same. After a few more pawn moves, YuzuKi slides his rook, leaving the defense of the pawn, but allowing it to quickly get to the center, which will prove useful once this promotion happens. Tek keeps pushing, and now YuzuKi brings his rook to the center. Now Tek slides his knight out of the way. This is a very good move, as it defends this square and allows Tek to bring his rook into the center, so that after captures with promotion, YuzuKi cannot capture this rook, as the knight is still defending and would capture back. So YuzuKi pushes a pawn, and Tek slides his rook in, starting that plan. He's now attacking the queen, so YuzuKi will have to do something about it. He captures with the promotion, and now the queen has to slide out of the way. This gives Tek complete control over the center, which quite possibly gives him complete control over this game now. YuzuKi pushes his pawn, and now Tek starts going after YuzuKi's remaining pawns. YuzuKi attacks the knight, and so Tek gets it out of the way. YuzuKi starts to bring a knight in, and now Tek moves his bishop. This doesn't quite defend anything or attack anything quite yet, but does give some extra control over a couple of the central squares, which may prove to be very important. YuzuKi moves his knight again, and Tek does the same. Another knight move, and now Tek slides his rook back, now defended by the knight, is attacking the queen, which forces it back another rank, and this move allows Tek to take a free pawn. Now YuzuKi attacks the rook with his queen. This is also check, which forces Tek to defend with the bishop, attacking the queen, not allowing the rook to be captured, but YuzuKi captures it anyways, so Tek gets a queen for rook trade, a rook for queen trade, and now attacks a knight. YuzuKi defends it with his own, and Tek starts pushing a pawn. YuzuKi does the same. Now Tek attacks one of YuzuKi's knights, although it's defended, and now it's only defended once, as YuzuKi pushes again. Tek takes the knight, which is defended by a pawn, and a knight, of course, although now YuzuKi's forced to capture with the knight, as the pawn capture would give up a free knight, and once the knight captures, the rook can slide down, delivering check, only allowing for one response. The knight capture happens, but the rook move doesn't, as it doesn't really accomplish too much. Instead, Tek slides the rook over, attacking the knight, which now locks down this pawn to the defense of the knight, and attacks the other pawn if the knight moves. YuzuKi pushes. Now he can move the knight and defend the pawn. Tek moves his knight again. YuzuKi pushes another pawn. Tek does the same. And now YuzuKi starts bringing his king into the game. Tek pushes again. And of course, having this one rook will prove to be very important. Having a piece that can move along the ranks is very strong, especially in the late game. Another pawn move, and now another king move, and Tek promotes. Now having two rooks. YuzuKi will have to do a lot if he wants to win this game. Although one thing that he has over Tek is 5 pawns to 1. So if he can manage to navigate around these rooks, there is a real chance that he can come back into it. Another pawn move. Now Tek attacks with his rook. I don't think he's up quite enough material to start sacrificing rooks for pawns like we saw Toggle do in the first qualifier. Another pawn move. And of course, Tek does not sacrifice. YuzuKi moves his king again. His plan is clearly to push these 3 pawns, defended by his king all the way. Something that I believe Tek will have to sacrifice a piece in order to do at some point. These knights are great candidates for that. It looks like that's what's about to happen. YuzuKi pushes a pawn. Tek does not sacrifice, instead getting control over the second innermost ring. YuzuKi pushes this pawn, and now Tek blocks with his own rook. And now YuzuKi can't attack the rook right away because it's defended by the knight. So he pushes this left pawn. And now Tek brings his knight in. This is check, but allows YuzuKi to bring his king up one more square. This could be a perpetual, perhaps. He does move his king up, and the second check happens. Now YuzuKi brings his king in front of his pawns. This attacks a rook if this one ever gets out of the way. And now YuzuKi can't defend this pawn. Very interesting endgame for sure. Now Tek attacks this pawn with the knight. Again, this will have to be a sacrifice if that's what he wishes to do. Now YuzuKi pushes this pawn as it's no longer attacked by this knight. This attacks this rook and will force it to leave this entire area. So let's see what he does. He doesn't. He instead defends it with a knight. This will be a rook for pawn trade if YuzuKi goes for it. Although he moves his knight, putting the king back into check. But once YuzuKi slides back here, his rook and knight are both under attack. So I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work out for Tek. He does end up going for one of the rooks, putting the king into check. YuzuKi could capture back the rook with his pawn, but he instead decides to capture the knight. Now after Tek checks the king again, this certainly loses a pawn. YuzuKi slides out of the way, and the pawn falls. But YuzuKi pushes, now attacking this rook. It will likely just come into the center, but that allows YuzuKi to attack with his knight. That's not what happens, though. The rook move does come in, but YuzuKi just brings his king out to attack. And now Tek slides his other rook into the center. This now allowing the knight move, and that's what happens. Now with 26 seconds left, Tek attacks the knight, and it is defended by another rook, but this allows promotion. That's what happens. But Tek takes the knight with check, so now after this recapture, Tek is still up a rook, which is pretty good. So it's going to be a rook and a knight, and a pawn, rather, for just 2 pawns. And from what I've seen, I believe rook and king is insufficient material unless the king is already in the corner. Although the king can find a checkmate, I don't believe it's forcible unless it's in the corner. And I'm not sure if he's going to be able to find a rook and knight checkmate with 25 seconds left on the clock. So I think this pawn is essential to winning. Anyway, Tek moves his knight. YuzuKi pushes another one of his 2 remaining pawns. The knight keeps moving. The pawn keeps moving. One more knight move. This attacks the pawn, but it can simply move forward. That's what happens. And now Tek brings this pawn in. There's nothing that YuzuKi can really do to attack it, as long as he manages to stop these promotions and keep his rook alive, I think he'll be able to win. Now YuzuKi pushes another pawn. Now whichever pawn promotes, of course this knight is also defending, but a pawn will be defending the square. Okay, so Tek checks with the rook, and once YuzuKi moves, this pawn's under pressure. Tek sacrifices a rook for a pawn, probably because he knows, I think he knows that he won't be able to find checkmate with just 18 seconds left, so I think he's going for the draw. Of course, as long as this knight doesn't get under attack, this pawn can't promote without being captured immediately. YuzuKi takes the rook, of course, and Tek starts to push his pawn again. YuzuKi promotes, and I find this interesting. I guess, is there enough time? I'm not sure. No, it looks like there's not, although, okay, so it looks like this is going to be a draw regardless, so the promotion is probably a fine move, as after captures, I think YuzuKi is going to be the first. It'll be close. I'm not sure. Let's see. So the kings start marching towards the pawn. Of course, I miscalculated with my arrows. Tek is already defending the pawn, and after a couple more king moves, it looks like Tek can push. YuzuKi's forced to slide out of the way. The king pushes. He moves the king way out of the way, and now I'm not sure. Maybe he's just looking for a timeout. So now he's just likely pre-moving, sliding his king all around. And so Tek has to be looking for a checkmate with 14 seconds. I don't believe it's possible, especially when the king's already in the center, but he's going to try. So after a few more moves, 13 seconds on the clock. Again, there's no increment, so he has to be very quick. King's shuffling around. Now I think what Tek has to do, he hasn't lost a single second yet, but I think what he should do, if he's worried about running out of time, is just start checking the king, try to force it to capture for insufficient material. Kings shuffle around. Not a single second has come off of either player's clocks. These moves must be happening like instantly. A whole bunch of king moves. They're just running around the circle now. A rook move actually comes out. YuzuKi loses 1 second off his clock. More king moves, another rook check. I'm just going to speed through some of these king moves until something happens. Actually, in the pre-moves, YuzuKi actually decides to capture the rook, leaving it with king against king, making this a draw by insufficient material. And Tek holding YuzuKi to a draw with the black pieces does give Tek the advantage going into game 2 with the white pieces. So let's see if he can manage a win. YuzuKi must win with black to win the match outright, or another draw will bring it to an Armageddon. So without further ado, let's see game 2. Okay, here we are in game 2. Tek with the white pieces, pushes the king's pawn. YuzuKi does the same. Again, we see Tek push the king's pawn twice right away. Players usually push the queen's pawn right after this. That's what YuzuKi does. Now instead of pushing a pawn, Tek gets the queen into the center very early. Okay, and now YuzuKi moves this pawn, which is actually a very interesting move that we don't see very often. This allows the bishop to get this diagonal, which could be used to maybe attack this knight at some point. Now Tek pushes his queen's pawn. Of course, no queen anymore defending it. YuzuKi actually goes for the fianchetto, although this pawn is now blocking this diagonal. But he will get a discovered attack onto the queen at some point, potentially. Of course, this bishop is not defended by anything currently, so he'll have to do that at some point. The queen slides out of the way early, now attacking this undefended pawn, which is pinned to the king. YuzuKi defends it, and now Tek slides out his own light square bishop, and YuzuKi pushes a pawn again. Tek pushes his king's pawn, and now YuzuKi moves his knight. I'm not sure exactly what this accomplishes, but I guess we'll see. Tek pushes again, YuzuKi pushes. Now it looks like maybe, so this knight move will, although it's defended by white's knight, it could defend this promotion square. Tek now moves his own knight out of the way. This does attack this knight because this bishop slid over, it's no longer defending it. YuzuKi pushes his rook's pawn, another knight move. This now defends this promotion square. Now black attacks white's queen with his bishop. It takes the knight, which of course was undefended. Another bishop move. I'm not sure exactly what this accomplishes. Tek attacks it with his own knight. Bishop slides right back. And now Tek promotes. He has a huge lead over the center. And now YuzuKi pushes his pawn. It's blocked by the knight, but if it can get attacked, there's a real chance that YuzuKi can promote pretty soon. Tek slides back his rook, now attacking the pawn right away. It is defended by a queen and a bishop, so we'll see what ends up happening. YuzuKi pushes another pawn, and now Tek attacks black's knight with his bishop, so now another pawn starts pushing. Tek does the same. Black pushes this pawn, and now Tek takes with the knight. It was undefended, which now leaves this promotion square open. It is defended twice still. Now YuzuKi moves his knight, likely looking to castle. Tek pushes another pawn. YuzuKi does the same. Now Tek's one square away from promotion once again. Very little that YuzuKi can probably do about it. Now YuzuKi moves his knight again. I see now that pawn move makes sense. It was meant to defend this knight, which is now attacking white's knight. White simply slides back to block the promotion, and YuzuKi castles. Tek promotes, now up 4 rooks to 2. YuzuKi now sliding his rook in, likely looking to attack this queen, again defended by a pawn, so if the queen takes, black will get his rook right back. So Tek brings in another rook to defend the central ring. So now it looks like YuzuKi can go for a rook and pawn for queen trade if you'd like, as long as Tek goes for that. He does try it. Tek does not go for the queen trade, instead now leaving both rooks and actually still attacking this rook with his queen. YuzuKi simply takes. This comes with check. I'm not seeing what else this really does because, of course, the rook can just take right back. That's what happens. Now YuzuKi slides this bishop up. It is attacked by this white bishop, and it's not defended by anything. So I'm not sure exactly what that accomplishes. It looks like it's just a free bishop. White takes it. Now YuzuKi moves a knight again. This, I believe, is also undefended, but I guess we'll see. Instead of taking it, Tek goes for this check on the pawn, although the pawn's defended by another pawn. I don't know why this happened. I think it's just a completely blundered queen. I don't know. Maybe he didn't see this pawn. I really don't know. So, of course, YuzuKi takes it. Now Tek takes this knight, which will allow the promotion, which will end up... So, let's see. Promote takes with rook. Okay, so this probably won't happen. He does promote, though. Takes with rook. It does happen. And YuzuKi slides his queen out of the way. Of course, it's under attack now. He's defended by the knight. But this does attack the knight, which forces it out of the way. YuzuKi starts pushing. Tek just takes the pawn, sacrificing a knight for pawn. This seems to be a very common move. Now this knight moves, likely looking to castle. YuzuKi now attacks white's bishop. Tek takes the knight. Now YuzuKi starts pushing another pawn. Oh, I see. The queen's defending the rook, so that's going to be a bishop for rook trade. And I suppose that's not too bad. It doesn't happen, though. Tek does castle. Now YuzuKi leaves the... Wow, this is confusing. I'm not sure exactly why he's doing this. He leaves the rook under attack, instead moves his... Oh, wow. Wow, I'm dumb. Okay, so the queen's pinned, or the rook's pinned to the queen. So now YuzuKi moves the knight up. Tek's still not taking the rook. Now moves his bishop. This will be a free pawn, I believe. So now YuzuKi breaks the pin. The rook's still under attack, but now defended by a pawn. I believe Tek now has to take the exchange. He does. And now Tek takes the free pawn. YuzuKi attacks with his bishop, and Tek just slides back. Now the queen comes towards the center. This is an undefended knight now. Tek attacks this bishop. So this will be an equal exchange. That's not what happens. YuzuKi now double attacks the knight and the bishop while also defending his own bishop. Very nice move. Tek slides his bishop out of the way. And I believe this knight is completely hanging, but instead YuzuKi decides to push. Oh, actually, of course, if he takes, he's no longer defending his own bishop, so that'll just be an exchange. Now Tek attacks the queen. Now black slides the queen over, still attacking the knight, although it's defended. Now Tek finds a fork on the queen and bishop, and now once the queen moves, this bishop will still be under attack twice, so it's no longer a trade, but YuzuKi still keeps defending the bishop. It falls, but okay. Okay, I see. So it's a double attack on the rook and knight, so no matter which piece takes, a piece will still fall. So Tek takes in the way that will keep the rook defended, so that black is forced to capture the knight anyways, so it does end up being an equal exchange. Now Tek finds a check, forces black's king out of the way. Another check comes in, of course defended by the rook. The king moves forward. Tek starts bringing another rook in. Of course, Tek is certainly in the driver's seat. Another rook about to come to the game. He has 3 rooks and 3 minor pieces for YuzuKi's queen and 1 minor piece. And Tek is also up 6 pawns to 3. So there's very little for YuzuKi to do here. It looks like the queen could come in handy. Of course, very, very powerful in circular chess. And he does have the clock to his advantage. 3 minutes to 2. Let's see how he fights. He attacks the rook. White just simply slides out of the way. This does attack 2 pawns, it looks like. But of course, this one's defended. So I believe it would make sense to push this one. But instead, YuzuKi pushes the other one. So of course, the undefended pawn falls. Now attacking a knight. YuzuKi doesn't defend, instead attacks the rook. But the knight doesn't fall. Instead, Tek simply defends his rook with another rook. So now the pawn push comes in. This knight's still hanging. It falls. This also comes... Never mind. No, this almost comes with a check. It will allow for a discovered attack if the knight moves. I'm not sure if Tek will see that. Promotion happens. It looks like Tek did not see that, although, of course, not a lot is accomplished by that. He instead attacks the newly promoted rook. YuzuKi attacks it, and now Tek attacks the queen. The queen slides out of the way, yielding the central ring, but now defending the rook. The bishop's forced to slide down to the center. This comes with check, which forces the king back. Another check comes in from the rook. Time getting very low. 44 seconds to 1:16. King moves again. Another check comes in from this rook. Going this way. King's forced to move again. The bishop moves back. And now YuzuKi starts pushing a pawn. With 17 seconds left, Tek moves his bishop again. Another pawn push comes in. Now these rooks are in the same rank. King is not in check. King moves out of the way. Rook slides down. Now YuzuKi brings his rook up, preventing any kind of check. With 8 seconds left, Tek finds a check, although this rook is defending in the square, so it's a bishop blunder. Tek finds a check. YuzuKi moves the king out of the way. This knight finally moves. YuzuKi attacks Tek's rook with his own, and Tek finds this check, which is a double attack on the queen. Of course, it's defended by a knight, so that's a free queen. So after YuzuKi moves his king, the queen falls, and I believe it's not quite forced to mate, so YuzuKi can get his rook in. I'm not sure. I think YuzuKi might manage to... Actually, I completely forgot to... Wow, I forgot that this rook was hanging. So it is at least a queen for rook trade, which makes this checkmate a lot harder to find in 5 seconds. Both players very low on time, but Tek, of course, much, much lower. He moves his knight. This gets his final rook into the game. YuzuKi starts pushing. Tek, now 3 seconds left on the clock. He has to find something very quick if he wants to not lose on time. Of course, another option, if Tek could manage to take all of YuzuKi's pieces at the very least, especially this pawn, he could get timeout versus insufficient material, which would result in a draw. Now YuzuKi moves his rook to the center, probably looking to defend this promotion. Tek finds another check. YuzuKi moves down, now attacking the rook. With 2 seconds left on the clock, Tek moves his rook. One more king move. Tek moves his knight. Now 1 second left on the clock. Now YuzuKi pushes his pawn, and there are no more moves in the game. This means that Tek loses on timeout. The game was all but over. If he just had maybe 5-10 more seconds left on this clock, he easily could have pre-moved his way to checkmate. Maybe just, I don't know, find a way to get rid of this rook. Even if YuzuKi manages to get a second rook, surely there's no way that 2 rooks and a king can stop all these pawns. So YuzuKi, by the skin of his teeth, manages to win the match 1.5 to 1/2, giving him the 4th seed in the final automatic qualification spot. Although Tek does earn another 8 points on the standings, which, after participating in just 2 qualifiers, pushes him all the way to the top spot on the point standings. Tek with 16 points is the 5th seed, which means he will play against 4th seed YuzuKi once again in the first round of the championship tournament. There was also a 3-way tie for 4th place, and the tiebreak was decided by strength of schedule. Ivan, having wins against tough opponents, manages to secure himself the 4th spot on the point standings, giving him the 8th seed going into the championship tournament. And that's it. The stage is set. The first round of the championship tournament will be happening next week, and here are the matchups. 1st seed Toggled will be going up against 8th seed Ivan the Cool. 2nd seed Toby KYR will be going against 7th seed Oreo Phallus. 3rd seed Maddie Zero will be going up against 6th seed Mateo. And of course, a rematch of Day 4 finals. 4th seed YuzuKi will be going up against 5th seed TekVnv. I'm especially excited to see these 2 players rematch. This was a very fun match to watch. The first round will be a 10+0 best of 4, following a similar format to the qualifiers, but with twice as many games. And the tiebreaker will be a 10-minute Armageddon, where now both players will bid for time and color. So the player willing to play with the fewest minutes on the clock to get their color will get it, and the other player will play with the other color with 10 minutes on their clock. If that doesn't make sense to you, hopefully it will. Once it comes up, I'll try to explain it the best I can. And anyway, with that being said, thanks for watching. I hope you're excited for the championship tournament, and I hope to see you in the next video.